every step I take, I have to ask myself, am I really enlivening myself, my immediate context, and my world? That is dharmic conduct. Yeah, and if you really understand this, you'll get in touch with the deep interdependence of all human beings. And you cannot but think of yourself as a human being first, as part of an ecological context first. On top of which there are all kinds of differences. Now, somebody might be born in Africa, somebody else somewhere else. It doesn't really matter if I really understand the context of this question. Yeah. Now, one of the ideas which is there in our tradition is what Preeti is referring to, which is called ApadDharma, which says that when there are very difficult circumstances, yeah, do things that don't threaten your life. Yeah, don't do things that are irrevocable steps of violence. So what we have learned to do as Indians is when we said, okay, yeah, I'm going to be very clear now. I'm not going to be very politically correct or wrong, whatever. So when somebody says you convert or I'm going to kill you, ApadDharma says, hey, take a step back. There is lots that you have to conserve. There is a beautiful culture that you have. Don't just give your life up. Okay. If you want to look up this idea, Ashish Nandi has written about it in a book called The Intimate Enemy. It's a very beautiful incident he talks about. He talks about how Cortez or Pizarro, whoever it was, took over South America, where he invited the high priests of the place, who were also the kings, for a dinner. And once they came into his place, he promised them that there'll be no arms, whatever. But the moment they stepped into the Spanish space, they were surrounded by people with guns, and they were told, give up this, give up that, or else. And these people refused, and they were just slaughtered. So he says the same context, if a set of Indian leaders, priests and all had gone, they'd have said, yeah, okay, accepted it. And he says very soon, whatever the oppressors were bringing in would soon start looking like a Hindu form. Yeah. Now, the big problem here is that in a context where the ApadDharma means Apad Kala means times which are very difficult, times which are dangerous. Yeah. When you have a generally peaceful context, the dangerous times go away quickly. Right? They might be there for a year or two and then they go away. But what's happened to us is this has not gone away. It's been around for almost 1,000 years. So we have found ways of doing all kinds of things, and that has defined who we are today, and that has become our dharma. Yeah, I can give you 100 examples of this. Right? One of the things I discovered very interestingly is why Americans can pronounce my name very well. Nobody has a problem pronouncing Raghu. But then they will say all kinds of strange things about Ananthanarayanan. So initially I would laugh it off. After that, I would say, if you can't pronounce it, I don't think you should try. Then I found out they pronounce Raghu properly because there is a sauce that is called Raghu. Yeah. And I know 100 paddies and all of these kind of people, right? Nice name like Padmanabhan becomes Paddy. But Csikszentmihalyi doesn't have to do anything about his name. He's not called chicken or any such thing. But if an Indian had a name like Csikszentmihalyi, I'm sure he'll be called chicken. And not only will he be called chicken, he will accept being called chicken. Yeah. And there are hundreds of examples like this. If anybody is here from Andhra and Telugu people conduct their marriage in the middle of the night. Do you know why? Because if you conducted your marriage in the day, the very high chance that the bride will be taken away and molested. So the muhurta is always at 3 a.m. and 4 a.m. when it's very safe. And all your celebratory songs are sung in a way that you can't make out with your celebratory songs. The same songs in Tamil Nadu and whatever is sung with a celebration. Same thing happens in Kashmir and other places. That's to protect yourself. And now it is called Dharma. In Andhra, you have to do it at 3 o'clock. Why? Nobody knows why. But it's this ApadDharma. And it's in so many, 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 many ways. So many ways we don't even recognize it. Yeah, if anybody is interested, you want to study it a little more, Bala Gangadhara has written about this, about how we have accepted in language, in ways of thinking. Yeah, for example, the idea of left and right, not an Indian idea. There is no such thing as left and right. Because if you look at many of the people, there are some ideas which are right, some ideas which are left. I don't know how many of you have read Ambedkar. Where do you place Ambedkar, left or right? So these kind of divisions, this kind of stuff is just not our way of looking at it. And the problem when you accept this is we use categories to define us, which don't actually define us. Okay, I'll tell you some of the really terrible examples of ApadDharma I've seen. In consulting, I was consulting with a company once when they called in some foreign consultants to work with them. And I found all the top managers saying yes, yes to whatever was presented, and then doing somersaults to make sure things happened in the right way, but go and present it back in the way it was accepted. So I called the group and I called the CEO and said, look, this is what is happening. What are you up to? Yeah. And I'll tell you very simple examples. Like there's a set of guys who come quanti. I am a totally, Harvard Business School case studies and so on. Haven't worked for a day in an organization. Some of them were students of mine coming and allowing the stuff about this is the way you must sell, this is that, profitability per unit, all this kind of stuff. And the head of sales is trying desperately to say that is not how we sell in India. We sell in India because we establish relationships. And when we establish relationships, there are ways in which our distributors will help us if things are not going okay. There are so many things that happen in that relationship that can't be defined. But if you start dealing with it like hire and fire, like if you start dealing with it in very, very cold, calculating terms, we won't be in business for a day. Okay, same thing with employees. I'm sure Preeti knows about it. Yeah, there's a very close friend of mine who went to Canada. We did a lot of work in India on organization development and people training and all of this. Yeah, he goes to Canada and then he talks to me. He says, look, whatever we did is completely useless here because as head of HR of Walmart in Canada, all that he's doing is hiring and firing and a few things like this and that, adjusting pay scales, and that's it. He says they talk about DEI, they talk about culture, nothing happens here. Because you don't have to worry. You're just selling things and making sure people listen to you. If they don't, they're out. Yeah. So all this is part of ApadDharma. When a set of top managers will accept things that they know are wrong, but they won't speak up and try really, really hard to, in spite of all of this, try to make things happen. Yeah, I can give you so many examples like this. So ApadDharma is what is now being looked at as dharma. What Gandhiji did was use ApadDharma brilliantly, but we've got stuck with it. Because I really think he was very smart. Because at that time, if we had stood up and thrown bombs all over the place, we'd probably have got slaughtered by our own people, by the way, like it happened in Jallianwala Bagh. But he brought in an idea of saying, look, I'm going to resist you. I'm going to use passive resistance and morally question you, which is very powerful at that time. But it has not redefined the dharma in a way that will make us progress. So we're celebrating, we don't use the word satyagraha nowadays. We use the word ahimsa. He never used the word ahimsa. He used the word satyagraha. And ahimsa was one of the means. Accepting ahimsa as the key word, if you go into the history of it, is again ApadDharma. Because it suited the British to sound as though they were very nice people out here. The Bengal famine didn't happen and genocides didn't happen in India, that it was all peaceful and they handed it over nicely, and so on and so forth. So these are very deeply ingrained ideas in us. And that's what we've been working with. Yeah,
Sorry.
Geetika, your question? You had something to say, Preeti?
No, after Geetika. Geetika, go ahead, ask your question.
Yeah, no, I think I was actually just trying to reflect on the possibility that I think it's actually connecting with what you just said about how we somewhere want to pretend like the genocides didn't happen in India, the famine didn't happen in India, and some part of the decolonizing work is almost reclaiming our history. And I think I'm actually trying to understand how much, and I'm not very familiar with the phrase ApadDharma, so I will read more on it. So I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it feels like at some point, a trauma response became culture. And then people ended up perpetuating that culture, saying this is culture when it was always a trauma response.
Yeah.
Am I reading that right?
Right.
Yeah.
So if I take it further, Geetika, two things happen in a trauma response. No? One is the Stockholm syndrome, where you start loving the oppressor. Yeah. The other is rage and reactivity. Neither of them helps you to really heal. See? And this is exactly what the third trauma response is: amnesia. So if you work with trauma people, these are the three things that happen. And this is exactly what is happening in India. And what we are trying to work with, which is why we're calling it the difficulty of being dharmic, is what is that dharmic space, which is neither the Stockholm syndrome and lactification of the self, nor is it what we're calling righteous retaliation, nor is it the amnesiac, but understanding all three and reclaiming humanness from all three. Yeah, and we don't think this is just an Indian issue. I think this is a world issue. Yeah, and the oppressor needs it as much as everybody else.